I had just moved to a small apartment in a busy city. A couple of months had passed since I left India for my new job as a nurse. At 35, I was excited and scared at the same time. The hospital was always bustling. I was still adjusting to the fast pace of life here. I didn't know anyone yet, and I often felt alone, even with the noise outside. I set up my space to make it feel like home. One ordinary evening after a long shift, I sat on my couch, exhausted. Suddenly, I saw something dart past my window. I blinked, thinking it was my imagination. I shrugged it off. Days went by, and it happened again. I heard whispers in the hallway. At first, I thought they were just neighbors talking, but then I started feeling cold spots in my apartment. Strange drafts would make me shiver. My skin felt prickly, and my heart raced. It always happened at night when the city quieted down, leaving me alone with my thoughts. One evening, I found a small trinket on my doorstep. It was an ornate object, something I thought I recognized. I held it tightly, feeling a strange familiarity. I asked my neighbors about it, and they shared their own stories. They talked about strange sounds, shadows, and even objects moving on their own. I felt a mix of fear and curiosity growing inside me. I wanted to dismiss their stories, telling myself it was in my head. But I couldn't ignore it anymore. That night I felt something heavy in the air, like I was being watched. I sat up in bed, listening. I heard faint voices echoing through the walls. My heart pounded harder. I wanted to scream or call for help, but fear paralyzed me. I started questioning everything. Maybe it was something from my past, something I brought with me from India. Or was it this new place that didn't want me here? I crept into the dim hallway, my breath coming in quick gasps. Suddenly, I heard a loud crash from the kitchen. I jumped out of bed. My heart raced as I tiptoed toward the sound. I opened the kitchen door, ready for anything. Nobody was there. Just the flickering light above, casting shadows on the wall. My gut told me something was very wrong. I turned slowly, scanning the room. I wasn't alone. That's when I heard it. A whisper right behind me, soft yet clear. "Maya." I froze, a chill running down my spine. I turned around slowly, holding my breath. Silence. There was nobody there, just an empty kitchen and the light flickering above me. My thoughts raced. I could feel something in the air, something dark and heavy. I didn't know what to do next. I needed to find answers. But how? I backed away, trembling. I could still feel the whisper lingering in the air, as if it was waiting for me to respond. Alone in my new home, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. I didn't sleep well that night. Every creak of the building felt amplified, each tick of the clock like a countdown. I finally dozed off only to be jolted awake by the sound of footsteps outside my door. They came slowly, deliberately, as if someone was hesitating. I held my breath, listening intently. When the footsteps stopped, a wave of panic hit me. I debated whether to check or stay in bed, hoping it was nothing. I clutched my blanket tightly. Seconds ticked by, and I finally mustered the courage to peek through the peephole. Nothing. The hallway was empty. I sighed in relief, but unease settled back in. I flipped on my bedside lamp, trying to dispel the shadows clinging to the corners of my room. Determined to regain some control over my life, I decided to take action. I needed to understand what was happening. The next day I headed to the library. If I couldn't find answers from neighbors, maybe the history of the building would give me some insight. I searched for articles, old newspapers, anything that would tell me more about my strange new home. Lonely hours passed as I flipped through dusty pages, a mix of dread and determination pushing me on. Then I found it. A short article from decades ago caught my attention. Tragedy strikes local apartment complex. It detailed how a fire had broken out, tragically taking the lives of a family who lived in my place. I read it twice to make sure I hadn't missed anything, my blood running cold. I hurried home, my mind racing. What if they were still here? What if they needed help? The thought gripped me tightly as the sun set. The shadows returned, longer and loomier, as I stepped into my apartment. I felt the chill settle again, heavy in the air. That night I resolved to reach out. If these spirits were trying to communicate, I wanted to know why. I set up a small table in the living room, lighting a single candle. Holding the trinket tightly, I closed my eyes and spoke aloud. "Is anyone here? Please, if you need something, let me know." I felt foolish after a few minutes of silence. I opened my eyes, ready to dismiss this as a silly attempt, only to see the candle flicker violently before the flame steadied. My heart lurched. I leaned in closer and then I heard it. A faint whisper like the rustle of leaves. "Maya." This time the voice was more urgent. I jumped back, my breath caught in my chest. It was definitely different this time. The air grew heavy as an overwhelming sadness washed over me. It felt like a plea for help, not an attack. I felt compelled to listen, but fear held me captive. As the shadows deepened around me, I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to find out what they wanted, what they needed. But as I began to gather my thoughts, the lights flickered and went out, plunging me into darkness. I stood frozen, listening to the soft whisper grow louder. Then a loud bang echoed from the kitchen. I rushed toward the sound, adrenaline coursing through my veins. When I stepped inside, I couldn't believe my eyes. The trinket from my doorstep was now on the counter, glowing faintly in the dark. I had no idea how. That's when I heard a child's laughter echoing through the room. This was just the beginning. I stood frozen, taking in the sight of the glowing trinket. My mind raced with questions. Had I somehow summoned it? The laughter echoed again, childlike and joyful, contrasting sharply with the oppressive heaviness that lingered in the air. I felt an inexplicable pull toward the counter. The candlelight shimmered off its surface, more prominent than before. I stepped cautiously closer, the laughter becoming a comforting hum. But the warmth faded as I began to notice the surroundings. The shadows felt thicker, almost sentient, as they coiled around me. I reached out for the trinket, thinking that maybe it held the answers I was desperately seeking. As soon as my fingers brushed against it, the laughter turned into a chorus, rising in pitch and urgency. "Help us!" they cried, and in that moment, the room felt like it spun around me. I staggered back, my heart racing. This was real. This wasn't just a figment of my imagination. "Who are you?" I shouted, trembling. The laughter ceased abruptly, leaving an unsettling silence in its wake. The air turned cold, and I could see my breath form small clouds before me. Then faintly a voice broke through. "We are trapped." It sounded like a child, desperate and full of longing. A mix of fear and sympathy coursed through me. "Trapped? How can I help you?" I asked, my throat dry. The silence returned, stretching between us like an unseen thread. Something stirred within me. They needed assistance, and I felt the weight of that obligation. Slowly, the shadows gathered again, coalescing into an indistinct shape. I flinched, instinctively taking a step back. The figure appeared hazy, shifting as if caught between worlds. The child's voice broke through once more. "You have to remember." "Remember what?" I demanded. My voice echoed, uncertainty creeping in. Perhaps my attempts to connect were futile. In that moment, a faint glow illuminated the room. And I saw it. Pictures lining the walls. Photographs I had never noticed before. They looked old, sepia-toned, depicting a family. A child, maybe the same one whose laughter filled the air, smiled brightly, while their parent side-eyed with cautious joy. They looked familiar, but I couldn't place them. As I stepped closer to one of the photos, the sadness washed over me again. A memory stirred deep within me, a fragment of an old dream. I remembered being here, in this same place, surrounded by those smiling faces. The clarity brought a sickening rush of dread. Was it possible that I had lived through their tragedy? Then I heard it again, more urgent this time. "Maya!" Everything shifted. The lights flickered back on, illuminating the kitchen as if nothing had happened. The trinket lay innocently on the counter, no longer glowing. I was left standing there, heart racing, the room eerily quiet once more. And just as I thought I was regaining my composure, the front door to my apartment slowly creaked open. I hadn't left it unlocked. My breath faltered. Someone was in the house. I held my breath, staring at the door as it swung open wider. The sound echoed in my ears, each creak a reminder that I was alone. Not anymore. I felt a chill creep down my spine, a sense of dread wrapping around me. "Hello?" I called out, my voice unsteady. No one answered. The hallway beyond the door was dark, the shadows swallowing any light that dared to venture near. My heart pounded in my chest. Maybe it was just the wind. Maybe I had simply forgotten to lock the door. But deep down, I knew better. Taking a cautious step forward, I strained to listen. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. There was a sound, a soft shuffle, like someone dragging their feet across the floor. Panic surged through me, the laughter from before echoing in my mind. "Is anyone there?" I tried again, more firmly this time. The noise stopped immediately. An unsettling silence filled the air, as if the house itself was holding its breath. I peered into the hallway, half expecting to see a figure standing there. Instead, the space remained empty, the sun fading outside. Shadows thickened, wrapping around corners. Every instinct told me to run, to grab my phone and call for help, but some bizarre force tethered me to the spot. Then I noticed it. A faint glow coming from the living room, flickering like the trinket had. I swallowed hard, the image of that glowing object flashing in my thoughts. Could it have something to do with whatever, or whoever, was in my apartment? With trembling hands, I stepped through the doorway, my gut twisted in anxiety. As I crossed the threshold, the light pulsed again, casting strange, distorted shapes on the walls. I moved closer, drawn by a need to figure this out. The living room was empty. My heart sank. But the glow came from the coffee table, illuminating a small object lying there. The moment I recognized it, bile rose in my throat. It was the same trinket I had seen before, the one that had set this whole bizarre sequence of events into motion. "Why is it here?" I murmured, bewildered. I reached out for it, instinctively drawn in, when suddenly the laughter returned, louder and more chaotic than before. "Help us! Help us!" It was the children from the voice earlier, now screaming desperately. My breath quickened. I pulled my hand back, terrified. This was no longer comforting. It felt menacing. What did they want from me? I turned, ready to leave, when I heard it again. Soft footsteps approaching from the hallway. They were closer now. I felt trapped. I couldn't go back. I had to confront whatever it was. Then the air shifted. A figure stepped into view, backlit by the fading sunlight. It was indistinct at first, but slowly it came clearer. A child. Their features flickered like a glitch in reality, shifting between angry and pleading as they locked eyes with me. "Maya," they whispered. An icy grip settled in my chest. "What do you want?" I barely managed to choke out, my voice shaking, but the child just pointed at the trinket on the table. "You have to remember." The walls seemed to close in as the footsteps grew louder, and I knew I had to make my choice. I could either reach for the trinket and uncover the truth, or I could run. At that moment I realized I wasn't just confronting a strange occurrence anymore. I was stepping into a mystery that threatened to consume me whole. I stood frozen, the child's voice echoing in my mind. My instincts screamed at me to run, to escape the uncertainty, but the desperate expression on the child's face kept me rooted in place. "You have to remember." What did that even mean? My memories felt like a jumbled puzzle, and here was a peace offering, a trinket swathed in mystery. The footsteps were closer now, unmistakably human, yet they carried an otherworldly weight. I could no longer hear the laughter. All I could hear was the rhythmic echo of those steps as they neared the threshold. "What happened to you?" I murmured, eyes darting back to the glowing trinket. I wanted answers, needed them more than I feared the unknown. As if the house itself sensed my resolve, the glow intensified. Shadows danced wildly on the walls, and I could almost make out figures twisting and contorting. The fear in my chest turned to something else, a pulse of curiosity that tangled with the dread I already felt. With a deep breath, I stepped toward the table, the air crackling with tension. I reached for the trinket. My fingers brushed against its cool surface, and the moment I touched it, a jolt shot through me. Memories that were not mine flooded my senses. I saw the child again. They were laughing, playing with other kids in a sun-drenched yard. Joy radiated off them, a stark contrast to the haunting void of the present, flickering images of a neighborhood, a home, and then darkness, sirens, screams. "What happened?" I gasped, pulling my hand away, breathless. I staggered back, barely catching myself against the wall. The laughter was back, ringing in my ears, but this time it twisted into cries for help. The child's face flickered before me again, eyes wide with fear and longing. "You have to help us! Help us!" The voice echoed, shattering the silence. Suddenly, the door at the end of the hallway swung open, slamming against the wall. I jumped, heart racing. My body screamed to flee this place, but I couldn't move. The child stood at the door now, no longer just an apparition. "Please," they whispered, disembodied yet so close. "Remember." Then everything went dark. The lights flickered and died, plunging the room into an inky blackness. I felt panic rise, the shadows closing in, merging with the darkness. "Help us." The voices grew louder, desperate, filling the thick air around me. I fumbled for my phone, heart pounding as I switched on the flashlight. The beam illuminated chaos, the furniture in disarray, the shadows now moving like they were alive. Someone was in the house. I screamed, ready to bolt, but I needed to know who was there, what they wanted. The child appeared again, standing closer. "Maya," they urged, "you have to fight for us." Just then, an ominous whisper coiled through the darkness, chilling my blood. "You shouldn't have touched the trinket." How did they know my name, and who had spoken? As uncertainty gripped me, I realized my decision to confront this terror had put me right in the crosshairs of something much larger than I could bear. I had to find out what was happening, before it consumed me too. I stumbled back, trying to process the voice that had called my name. The flashlight trembled in my hand as I swept it across the room, searching for the source. Shadows melted into one another, twisting and curling like tendrils of smoke, flickering at the edges of my vision. The child had vanished, leaving only a chill in the air. "Who are you?" I called into the silence, feeling silly as soon as the words left my mouth. Asking for a name when it was clear something more sinister was at play. The house felt suffocating. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant whisper was amplified in the stillness. I took a shaky breath and turned the flashlight's beam toward the end of the hallway. The door still ajar, inviting yet foreboding. Gathering my resolve, I stepped cautiously toward the doorway, my heart thudding loudly in my chest as I crossed the threshold. The air around me hummed with energy. I pointed the light within the room, revealing a disheveled space. Old furniture covered in dust, cobwebs clinging to the corners. It looked as if no one had lived here in years. But there it was, the trinket I had touched now sitting vulnerable on a fractured table. It glowed softer now, almost pleading. Was it a message? A warning? When I found the courage to inch closer, the light flickered again, and the memory of the child resurfaced, clearer this time. "Maya, you have to help us." It was as though the room was alive with the child's desperation. With a surge of determination, I focused on the trinket. I grabbed it, but the moment my fingers wrapped around it, pain shot through my hand. I gasped and dropped it, stumbling back as scenes erupted before my eyes. Children playing with sparklers, laughter spilling into the evening, but suddenly the warmth faded. The sky darkened, replaced by chaos, a house engulfed in flames, the sounds of crying, a figure silhouetted in the doorway screaming. It felt like someone else's memory, a fragment of a life cut short. "Why can't you just tell me?" I shouted. But the echoes of the past drowned out my voice, leaving me feeling smaller every second. I backed away, bumping into the wall as something cold wrapped around my ankles. I twisted around, fumbling the flashlight in my grasp. The beam caught a glimpse of what I had run into, like tendrils of smoke solidifying right before me, taking a shape that sent chills down my spine. "Let go of me," I cried, but the coldness crept higher, clutching at my arms. The whispers returned, swirling around me. "You woke us. You have to choose." Choose? What did that mean? Panic flared in my chest as the darkness danced around, tightening its grip. I felt the urge to break free, to tear away from the grasp of this unseen force. Then, amidst the chaos, I caught a glimmers of light flashing at the far end of the room. It flickered in time with the memories, forming a path. Without thinking, I surged forward, pulling myself from the shadows that clawed at me. Whatever that light was, it called to me like a lifeline in a storm. But as I pushed through, a voice hissed, "You shouldn't be here." And suddenly, I was falling into the light. Where would it take me? The uncertainty loomed heavy as the darkness receded behind me. I tumbled through a dense veil of light, strange sensations coursing through me. One moment I felt weightless. The next, it was as if I had plunged into icy water. My breath caught in my throat and I gasped, feeling the rush of cold enveloping me. As the brightness dimmed, I found myself in an unfamiliar room. This one looked more lived in than the last, with faded wallpaper peeling at the edges and furniture that bore signs of neglect. A clock ticked loudly from somewhere, echoing in the thick silence. My flashlight flickered once more, and a wave of dread washed over me. This place felt different, more real but also more dangerous. I took a tentative step forward, scanning the room. There were family photos hanging on the wall, faces smiling, but their eyes seemed to follow me like shadows. I felt exposed under their gaze. Then I noticed it, a shadow passing just beyond my periphery. I spun around, my heart racing. "Hello?" I called out. The silence swallowed my voice. The air felt charged, thick with anticipation. I didn't want to be alone here. I began to search through the room, half hoping to find something, or someone, that could explain what was happening. I picked up a faded book resting on a table. Its cover was worn down, barely holding together. The title read, "Whispers of the Forgotten." I flipped through the pages hesitantly. Scribbles marked various entries, leading to unsettling notes about lost children and dark figures. Each line fueled my growing fear. I slammed the book shut, suddenly uneasy. "Why did I come here?" I whispered to myself. But I already knew. I had to uncover the truth behind that child's plea. Glancing up, I noticed a door slightly ajar on the opposite wall. My instincts screamed at me to run, but curiosity pulled me toward it. I pushed the door open ever so slightly and peered inside. The room beyond was dim and filled with shadows. Items littered the floor, and an old rocking chair creaked gently, though there was no one sitting in it. A dust-covered toy lay nearby, a porcelain doll with cracked features and an unsettling smile. I recoiled at the sight, my skin prickling with unease. Then, out of nowhere, I heard it, a soft voice barely above a whisper. "Help us." I froze. The voice was different but hauntingly familiar. It drew me in like a moth to a flame. I stepped forward, ignoring the unease settling in my bones. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice shaky. "What do you need help with?" A chilling breeze swept through the room, extinguishing my flashlight and plunging me into darkness. I fumbled to turn it back on, my hands shaking. When the light returned, the doll was gone. That's when I saw it. An open window at the end of the room, curtains billowing as if beckoning me. A sudden thought struck me. I wasn't alone. Something wanted me here. Something more than just a memory. My heart raced. I had to decide quickly. Should I follow the voices, or should I find a way to escape? As I contemplated my next move, I felt a presence behind me, cold and heavy. "Turn around," it whispered, and my breath caught in my throat, paralyzed by fear. What would I find if I obeyed? I turned slowly. My heart thundered in my chest and every muscle tensed. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, waiting for my next move. I knew I should run, but curiosity held me like a vice. In the dim light, I could make out the outline of a figure. At first, it seemed like an illusion, a distortion in the air. But as I squinted, the image sharpened. A girl stood there. Her clothes were tattered, her hair matted and wild. She looked lost, her eyes wide with fear. "Help me," she whispered again, pleading. "They won't let me go." I blinked, trying to process what I was seeing. This girl looked familiar, like one of the faces from the photos. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Please." She stepped closer, her feet gliding over the ground. "You must help me find them." "Find who?" I took a step back, the chill of the room wrapped around me. She opened her mouth to answer, but instead, an anguished wail pierced the silence. It surged through the air like a shockwave, and I instinctively covered my ears. The girl's expression twisted in pain, and suddenly she was gone, as if the shadows had swallowed her whole. My heart pounded. The room felt more alive now, the walls constricting around me. I needed to break free of this nightmare. I dashed for the door, but as I reached for the handle, it slammed shut with a deafening bang. Panic surged within me. I turned to the window, the only other possible exit. I ran toward it, but the closer I got, the more resistance I felt, like an invisible wall pushing against me. The curtains danced wildly, as if eager to escape this place. I could hear the girl's voice echoing in my mind, a plea for help that twisted and turned in my brain. Suddenly, the rocking chair began to move on its own, creaking with an otherworldly energy. I stumbled back, nearly falling. Just then, I saw it again, a flicker of movement near the corner of the room. My curiosity piqued even in my fear-driven state. Were there more? "Who else is here?" I shouted, half blinded by panic and half driven by a desperate need for answers. The wailing intensified, swirling around me like a storm. Then it stopped. A suffocating silence fell, thick and heavy. In that moment I realized something was drawing nearer. Whatever was within these walls was enraged, and I was its prey. Before I could react, something icy gripped my arm. I froze, terror gripping my heart. I turned, and there in the shadows stood a figure formless yet very much present. My thoughts raced. Could I still escape, or was I too late? The air buzzed with anticipation. Then amidst the chaos I heard a soft voice overlapping the silence saying, "You shouldn't have come." That was all I needed to understand. I was in deeper than I ever wanted to be. I felt trapped. The figure in the shadows loomed larger, its presence enveloping me. My instincts screamed at me to move, to escape, but my feet were rooted to the spot. I could hardly breathe. Then I remembered the girl, the plea in her voice, the desperation in her eyes. I tore my gaze from the figure and shouted, "What do you want? Let me go!" My voice echoed, bouncing against the walls. But there was no answer, only the thick air pressing down on me. The shadows shifted, and suddenly the echoes of my words were joined by whispers. They seemed to come from all directions. I focused, trying to make sense of them. Fragmented phrases floated into my awareness. Help us, find us, lost, trapped. I squeezed my eyes shut, shoving my fingers against my ears, but the whispers continued, relentless and jarring. Images of the girl flooded my mind, and a new thought struck me. Were these voices tied to her? Were they trapped here just like her? The chill around me deepened. I forced myself to look again at the figure. It seemed to pulse slightly, like a flame flickering out. I felt a pull, an urgent need to understand. "Is that you?" I managed to ask, barely audible. "Is she with you?" The figure remained silent, but as my words hung in the air, it shifted closer. An energy coursed through me. Was it fear or hope? I took a trembling step forward, drawn toward it. "Please, just tell me what you want." Suddenly the figure reached out, a hand extending toward me. I gasped, instinctively stepping back. I wasn't sure I wanted to grasp what it offered, yet the thought of leaving without answers gnawed at me, urging me to move closer. Then a flicker caught my eye near the door. I turned my head just in time to see a sliver of light cutting through the dark. It was almost inviting, but just as quickly, the door slammed shut tighter, the splintered wood revealing no cracks for escape. Panic surged again. "I can't stay here," I shouted into the void. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices rising until one voice, sharp and clear, broke through. "You will never escape." It was a chilling promise that sent shivers down my spine. In that moment, I had to make a choice. Would I press forward and confront the darkness, or would I give in to the fear that had gripped me from the start? The whispers of the unseen continued their haunting melody, and still I hesitated. Then everything darkened. The shadows consumed the light, leaving me in a void where I could hear only my own breathing. My heart raced, fueled by a desperate need to survive. "Help!" I cried out again, the word echoing into the abyss, where I hoped it might find someone. But it was too late for regrets. I felt a sudden shift in the air, a weight pressing down around me. Then a loud crash echoed from somewhere beyond the walls. A jolt of adrenaline shot through me. Maybe this was my chance. I turned toward the sound, still unsure of the path ahead. But I knew one thing. I had to find a way out before whatever was here made its last move. The crash reverberated through the darkness, ringing in my ears as I bolted toward the sound, heart racing. It was a desperate hope, a small light of possibility in the midst of terror. I'd spent too long feeling trapped by shadows, facing whatever lurked within these walls. There had to be a way out. I rushed toward the door. It felt solid under my trembling hands. I rattled the handle, but it remained unyielding. A low growl resonated, vibrating in the air. Anxiety clawed at my chest as I glanced back at the figure, still hovering in the shadows. It didn't move, yet I felt its gaze pressing into me, unrelenting and heavy. "Why are you doing this?" I called out, desperation creeping into my voice. "What do you want?" But the figure remained silent, a dark sentinel blocking my path back to freedom. Glancing away, I noted the flicker of light again, illuminating a small window that I had previously missed. It's now or never, I thought, adrenaline kicking in. Gathering courage, I pivoted, charging toward it with all my strength. But as I reached the window, dark tendrils surged behind me, grasping for purchase. I squeezed my eyes shut and threw myself through the opening, not knowing how far I'd fall or what lay beyond. I felt the rush of wind whip around me as I plunged downwards, fear and exhilaration battling within me. Then I landed, surprisingly softly, on damp grass. I opened my eyes, heart pounding, disoriented yet relieved to be on solid ground again. I looked around. Everything felt surreal. The moon glimmered above me, illuminating an empty street bathed in silver light. I was outside in the real world, but I didn't feel safe yet. Still trembling, I turned to glance back at the building, half expecting to see a shadowy figure at the window. But the space was completely still, empty. That's when I realized that the whispers were gone too. Had I escaped? I didn't know. I stood up, my body frail from the encounter as I stumbled away from the building, thoughts racing. Had the children's voices truly been pleading for help? Or had my time in that other room twisted my perception of reality? I had no answers, only lingering echoes in my mind. I crossed the road and took a deep breath, the cool air sharp and refreshing. Relief washed over me, but an unsettling sense remained. I needed to know the truth. What about those whispers? What happened to the child? I glanced back once more, where the apartment loomed silently in the distance, the darkness stretching along the edges. Each unanswered question hung in the air like the strange weight of that trinket, a reminder of something unfinished. I couldn't shake the feeling that while I had escaped, some part of those stories lingered within those walls. As dawn started breaking, the first rays of sunlight tore through the horizon, piercing through the night. I moved to the far end of the street, a sense of urgency pulling me. I had to uncover the history of that apartment complex. Maybe then I could give meaning to what had happened. Days passed. I found myself returning to the library, poring over records and articles about the family that had lived there. Whispers of loss dripped from every page. But as I turned the last article, convinced I might finally find resolution, I noticed a new one dated only days before. Local family reports strange phenomena in nearby apartment complex. My heart dropped and I realized I wasn't alone in my experience. The darkness wasn't finished. The voices still lingered, waiting, reaching for truth they couldn't grasp. They needed someone to remember, to seek help even when it felt hopeless. I stepped out into the bustling street, a resolve settling in my chest. I didn't know what awaited me, but I understood this. The past might be shrouded in shadows, but it was the present that offered the chance to truly confront what had been lost. I would be their voice, weaving through the threads of the unknown, forever changed, yet still chasing a light through the dark. I wasn't done. Not yet.